Millions of years ago, humanity was almost completely destroyed.
What?
The slopes of Mount Everest are literally littered with the corpses of people who will never be buried. In this video, I will tell you about the most terrifying and shocking historical facts. We will discuss those events that literally turned the world upside down. And at the end of the video, you will learn about probably the most horrific war crime in the history of humanity. Enjoy the video. I would like to start my story with a very sad one. Immediately after World War II, a complex period began in relations between the USSR and the USA, which was called the Cold War worldwide. At that time, there was a real race between the superpowers in literally all spheres of society's life. And one of the main competitions, which I want to tell you about, was held in space. It's a well-known fact that the USSR was the first to send a man into space, launched the first artificial Earth satellite, and created some of the best rockets to this day. America also needed to respond. They were the first to conquer the moon and created unique space shuttles for multiple uses, called space shuttles. And you will learn about one of such shuttles right now. In general, America had several shuttles, but today we will talk only about one of them. It was called Challenger. This ship's crew had successfully completed 9 flights. However, the 10th flight was the last. On the 73rd second of the flight, at a great height, the external fuel tank exploded. As a result, the rocket and Challenger were completely destroyed. The entire crew of 7 people died. All of them were experienced astronauts and scientists. But what amazes me the most is the fact that some crew members survived the explosion. The shuttle's cabin turned out to be very sturdy, which kept it intact. At least 3 crew members were conscious after the disaster. This is indicated by the fact that they turned on their personal air supply devices. Most likely, all these people were conscious until the very fall. Almost 3 minutes later, the cabin fell into the ocean at a speed of 200 miles per hour, straight from a height of 12 miles. Such a powerful impact made survival impossible. The loads experienced by the crew were tens of times beyond the limits for a human. By the way, I'd have found some shocking information for you. Not always are rescue operations organized. Yes, when disasters like the Challenger crash occur, such commissions are set up in just a few hours, and all the victims of the incident are always trying to be found. But there are places where, even knowing the exact location of the injured or even the deceased, no one will ever try to retrieve them. And such places are in the mountains. There are many desperate people who love to set various challenges for themselves, and many of them are passionate about mountaineering. And of course, the most daredevil among such people want to conquer the world's highest mountain, Everest. But not everyone knows how difficult it is to do so. The oxygen concentration at an altitude of over 3 miles is so low that every step for a climber is very hard. And if a person experiences such overloads for a couple of seconds, he can die. Because the blood inside the body will literally boil as the oxygen in it tries to escape.
What?
Naturally, in such conditions, everyone is on their own. Many climbers get injured during the ascent. Some may even get sick due to very low temperatures. And you can't take a refrigerator for food and heavy generators with you to the top. So very many fail to complete the ascent, and some even die. Naturally, dragging someone along with you when it's hard to take even a step is not the best idea, especially if it's a corpse that won't even help you. Therefore, the slopes of Everest are literally sown with the dead. The mountain has become a kind of cemetery. At least 200 people have never returned from the hike and remain lying somewhere in the mountains. And this fact really scares me. In general, mountains are a very dangerous place. Any tourist group risks getting into terrible situations. They are often attacked by wild animals, bears, wolves, or very bad weather sets in, when even a fire to warm up is impossible to make. All these reasons for the disappearance of such groups are understandable and of little interest. But what if I tell you that there is a terrible place where 9 people died under the most mysterious circumstances? I was seriously tense when I learned this shocking story. In 1959, a tourist group of students from the USSR, led by the experienced traveler Igor Dyatlov, set out to conquer the surroundings of Mount Everest. At the end of January, The guys began their hike, and by February 12, they were supposed to reach their destination. By the way, the group was well prepared. They had literally everything to successfully complete their hike. But something went wrong, and the students did not make contact on the agreed dates. This seriously alarmed everyone involved in the hike. But the search for the missing students only began at the end of February. Then several groups were formed to search for the tourists on the most dangerous part of the route. And after a few days, they found a tent camp on the slope. However, there was no one in it. Things were scattered around, and any tracks had long been covered by snow. The search for the students continued. Finding them was relatively easy. The bodies of the tourists were scattered not far away, and the way they looked shocked everyone. Some of the guys were undressed to their underwear. Some were dressed in warm clothes, but still froze to death. But what was most alarming were the blood and wounds of the students. Initially, the investigative committee thought that the tourists were attacked by local aborigines. However, this opinion turned out to be wrong. There were assumptions that they were attacked by wild animals. But this information was also refuted. Then the case was decided to be closed, and in the causes of death, it was written that the tourists could not cope with the weather conditions and died. Naturally, this outcome did not satisfy the relatives, and many mass media were teeming with conspiracy theories. For example, those very aborigines who were suspected assured that they saw a fireball in the sky. Then a theory about aliens who killed the students appeared. Someone claimed that gunshots were heard. There were theories that the tourists died from highly toxic rocket fuel. This idea also explained why the Aborigines saw a fireball. There is no reliable information about what happened to the students, and perhaps the state is hiding something from us. What do you think is the reason for the death of the Dyatlov group? But what amazes me the most is the fact that one participant did manage to survive. He fell ill before the group planned to conquer the pass. Thanks to this, he was the only one of all the students who remained alive. In the USSR, there were quite a few loud incidents. For example, in 1986, the world-famous disaster at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant occurred. And now I will briefly tell you how and why this happened and what horrors it led to. One fine night at the station, they were supposed to conduct tests on the fourth power unit. Naturally, this implied serious preparation. However, almost no one followed the technical regulations, which led to fatal errors. All safety systems were simply disabled. The reactor was manually controlled, and no one even knew about its flaws. As a result of all these factors, perhaps the most famous disaster in the world associated with peaceful atom occurred. What did all this lead to? First of all, the most prosperous city in the country, which proudly bore the name of Pripyat, became a place of alienation. Literally, all residents were forced to leave their homes, and a whole strip of forest turned red from high radiation levels. This happened because the wind was blowing in that direction, carrying radioactive particles. Thus, the famous Red Forest appeared, one of the most dangerous zones in Chernobyl. The entire area was littered with the corpses of birds. They were among the first to be exposed to the most terrible radiation. Wild animals living in the forests also suffered from radiation. Many newborns had very scary mutations. By the way, this problem was also observed in people. The internet has many scary photos of two-headed calves, 8- and 6-legged deer. This fact really scares me. But the scariest thing is that the Chernobyl accident increased the number of cancer diseases, dementia, and other deviations worldwide. And I'm not talking about the descendants of people who participated in the disaster cleanup. Even those people who were thousands and tens of thousands of miles away from the nuclear power plant were exposed to excessive radiation. The radioactive cloud affected almost all of Europe to some extent. In fact, there were disasters in the most distant times that killed hundreds of thousands and millions of people. For example, around 70,000 years BCE, a volcanic eruption occurred that nearly wiped humanity off the face of the Earth. This incident was called the Toba Catastrophe, and I wanted to tell you about it. But what exactly happened in those distant years? On the territory of modern Indonesia, there was an eruption of the supervolcano Toba. It was so terrible that all living organisms close enough to the volcano died almost instantly. The explosion was so powerful that by modern standards, it could be compared to the use of several nuclear missiles. So much volcanic ash, dust, and sand rose into the sky that for 10 years, no one saw the sun. A real volcanic winter began. The air temperature did not rise above 32 degrees Fahrenheit for many long years. It seemed as if a new ice age was about to begin. Naturally, such a terrible catastrophe could not but affect the flora and fauna. Almost all living organisms in Europe and Asia died, and geneticists even believe that at that time, humanity was on the brink of extinction. Only the inhabitants of Africa were more or less safe, but even that did not help them. According to scientists, only about 2,000 individuals survived. This is indicated by various genetic studies, and this fact just amazes me. After all, we are all descendants of those lucky ones who managed to survive, literally, the end of the world. So in fact, we are all distant brothers and sisters. It's scary to imagine how many animal species were completely destroyed then. By the way, there were also terrible weather collapses in modern human history. For example, I found information for you that something terrible happened in 1816. Then, for an entire year, snow and ice did not melt. It was a real scenario of minor ice age, and again, a volcano was the cause.
Another one.
And the most surprising thing is that it was again located in Indonesia. However, it had a different name. This time, the climatic catastrophe occurred as a result of the eruption of Mount Tambora. It was not as powerful as Toba, but even so, there was enough ash to cause a real winter in Eurasia. The reason is the same: volcanic ash. It simply blocked the entire sky, preventing sunlight from reaching the earth. Witnesses described that even in summer, snow could fall, and the weather was about the same as in late autumn. Almost constant rains fell all the time, and the snow and ice simply did not melt. Naturally, this led to the destruction of all crops. Then, a terrible famine began in Asia and Europe. As a result, thousands and tens of thousands of people died. But the worst was yet to come. For some unknown reason, it was then that a particularly dangerous disease, cholera, began to spread worldwide. Previously, it was only known in India, but now it mutated and became extremely contagious. As a result, there was not a single country in the world that did not suffer from this cholera. There were 7 epidemics of this disease, resulting in millions of deaths. And who knows, maybe all these events were somehow connected. If you have your own ideas, you can always share them in the comments. Of course, all these incidents are terrible. But personally, I am most frightened by historical facts related to people. You've certainly heard about the horrors that occur in war. About how soldiers and civilians die. How children starve. But few know that on the eve of the most terrible tragedy of humanity, World War II, the Japanese military committed one of the most egregious war crimes. In 1937, Japanese troops entered the Chinese city of Nanking. The locals did not attach much importance to this incident. Almost everyone thought that the ordinary civilian population, which did not resist, would be safe. But there were those who were very worried about the attack and fled. And those who did leave their homes were very lucky. After the Japanese troops finally captured the city, they began to commit real atrocities, and the most humane of them seemed to be mass shootings of civilians. For example, all the girls were raped. At least 20,000 Chinese women suffered from these horrors, and this is just the adult population of the country. The number of children who were raped is not reported. The Japanese also competed in who could cut 100 people the fastest. As a result of this massacre, tens of thousands of people died in the most terrible agony. By the way, it was because of these disputes that all the incidents were called the Nanking Massacre. In addition to terrible murders and rapes, the military committed even more horrific acts. For example, the Japanese literally hunted pregnant women. For them, it was just a game. They stabbed the bellies of these unfortunate girls with bayonets. Is it necessary to say in what agony the ordinary residents died? In total, several 100,000 civilians died as a result of the Nanking Massacre. All these people did not resist. It was a real war crime, one of the loudest and most large-scale. In this video, I told you about the most terrible historical events and facts that have ever occurred on Earth. Thanks for watching.